Today, I want to cover one story on GeoPol, and that's Donald Trump in NATO Summit in Ankara. When he arrived there on the first day of summit on Tuesday, nobody really paid attention too much to his plane or how he arrived to Ankara, because we were focused on what's coming, and that's a meeting with President Erdogan, that's a meeting with President al-Shara of Syria, President Zelensky of Ukraine, potentially other prime ministers or presidents, also his fights with, for example, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, or Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, because that happened some days before summit. He came on that expensive gift from Qatari government to Ankara, and it was important to him to arrive in a blingy, shiny, and a new toy, which he get as a gift to him, not the gift to United States. Also, some are claiming that that's a gift to United States. When he flew out of Ankara on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Turkish time, he flew out on Air Force One Legacy, the old one, the battered one, the one which he dislikes because it's not blingy, shiny, it's not expensive, but it is expensive, but not expensive in his likeness. It doesn't have gold, but has capabilities to defend him and those who are flying with him at the moment. And it was built for purpose, not for luxury. But what we learned over the last 48 hours is that he didn't flew out on AFO Legacy, but he flew out with a handful of his administration members on a third plane, which was a military plane. And AFO Legacy was a decoy with the members of his administration and journalists, because there was a substantial threat to him, a security threat, and the members of his administrations and those journalists who flew with him in and out of Turkey for NATO Summit. And they didn't inform anyone about that. I remember over the years hearing stories about President Obama, President Clinton, President Bush, President Biden flying somewhere and letting us know later that they flew somewhere because there was a security reason for that. For example, like Iraq or Afghanistan, or President Biden to Ukraine. And journalists who were part of presidential pool knew about that, kept their mouth shut, and then later revealed to public and to the world that they are traveling with the president to security endangerment, very non-safe zone, war zone, and they're covering their visit there. And nobody had anything against that. We all understand that there is necessity to protect president and the members of his or his administration at some point. But something now, when I look back, gives me thinking that they knew that something might happen, but they didn't inform anyone about it, even the rest of the world. And why we know that? Because presidential complex in Ankara is very fortified and very secure complex. It's a basically home to the President Erdogan in Ankara, and he has one similar complex in Istanbul where he spends most of his time. In that complex, you can't just walk in. You need to have permission. You need to have security clearance. You have to have a security check before you get in. We all journalists went through that several times over the 3 days that we spent there, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Also, you couldn't arrive there just if you sit in a taxi or in a car or on a foot. You needed to be escorted in selected buses, shuttle buses for that event. So, before President Trump came out on the second day of summit to speak to journalists, his entourage from Secret Service came in and they said, you need to leave this room so we can do a security sweep and prepare this room for the press conference, and then you'll be back. When we started complaining about that, they said, if you don't leave, there will not be the press conference. As much as you can complain, but you need to leave. And as much time you take us now, that much time press conference will be late. So press conference started about 2 hours late once they allow us to come back in. And the question to me was, why in the hell are you doing that? Because, first of all, we are not in space which is a publicly available or publicly accessible space. It's a presidential complex. It's run by President Erdogan and his administration and his security force. So you don't trust your ally, your friend, your brother, or however Donald Trump calls Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And then once you finish that press conference, once you leave that premise, you showed us that you don't trust the members of your own administration and you don't trust the journalists who are traveling with you, and you pull the deception in front of eyes of entire world because there was a threat against you by Iran or their proxies or someone else. We don't know yet if Iran was really the only threat towards President Biden and his President Trump, and his entourage. So this shows how much disrespect and this trust he has towards his colleague, President Erdogan of Turkey, other colleagues, journalists, and members of his administration. So it is really funny to see this whole story, but the most funniest part of this story is how he left AFO legacy on a catering track. So they didn't even thought before that how would look if he lives in a truck that brings food and drinks. And that was their biggest mistake, because today I saw so many memes and comments and things on social media where people are mocking them because they did it on a catering truck, because they didn't plan properly how to do that. Yeah, there was a need for deception, but for God's sakes, on a catering truck. And another thing here is Donald Trump thought that this might fly and that nobody will discover this whole story. So let's see how this story will end. But if I was member of his administration, I would resign today, because he put my life in danger with this deception and didn't inform me that my life or life of my colleagues and my friends and people who support him might be in danger. If I was part of his administration and was on that plane, I would go and tell him that, and then I would resign, and I would publicly resign from position there. If I was his colleague or friend from other administration, and if they didn't inform me, about the potentiality of attack or security threat during a NATO summit, I would very much in the future judge every single word or action by Donald Trump and his administration with utmost distrust because of this. That was GeoPol.